Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. How have you been lately? Feel free to share with me in the comments. I truly love hearing from you. Now, grab something warm to drink, get cozy, and let's step into a story that might just touch your heart in ways you didn't expect. In the poor village of Maple Hollow, where dry winds swept through cracked dirt paths and hope felt like a rare visitor, lived a young woman named Elsie. Though only 21, her eyes held the sorrow of 100 lifetimes. Since the day her mother died, life had become a series of silent tears and invisible wounds. Her father, once a kind-hearted carpenter, had drowned himself in alcohol. He remarried a bitter woman named Ruth, who seemed to despise Elsie with every breath. Day after day, Elsie was the housemaid, cooking, cleaning, chopping firewood, working in the fields from sunrise to sunset, and often sleeping on an empty stomach. Everyone in the village knew. They pitied her, but no one dared to speak. Silence was safer than challenging her father's madness. Elsie never complained. She had learned how to survive in pain. But deep within her soul, she longed for one thing: peace. Not riches, not rescue, just peace. And somehow what she had longed for all these years didn't arrive in shining armor, but in worn-out shoes and the quiet strength of a stranger named Cris. Cris came from the city. His clothes were worn, his shoes torn, but his eyes were sharp and thoughtful. For 3 long months he had worked on Elsie's father's farm, clearing weeds, planting yams, fetching water, lifting heavy loads. From dawn till dusk, his back was soaked in sweat, yet he hadn't been paid a single cent. "Next week," her father would always say. "Wait till I sell something." One hot afternoon, Cris walked into the yard, tired and frustrated. "Sir, I need my wages today," he said firmly. Her father scratched his head, then glanced at Elsie, who was sweeping the dusty ground with a pale, tired face. A wicked grin spread across his lips. "You want money?" "Yes, sir. I've worked for 3 months." "Well then, take that girl. That's your payment." Elsie's heart shattered. She dropped the broom, eyes filling with disbelief. "Father, please, don't do this." "Shut up," he barked. "You should be happy someone wants you." Ruth folded her arms, smirking. "Good, one less mouth to feed." Elsie fell to her knees, begging, crying, but no one cared. Cris looked at her. She was exhausted, broken even, but there was something about her. Something pure, something deeper than her beauty. "She's beautiful," he murmured. "What did you say?" her father asked. "I'll take her," Cris replied, without hesitation. And just like that, Elsie's life changed. Not because someone rescued her, but because for the first time, someone saw her as a person worthy of love. The ride to the city was long and tiring. Elsie sat by the window, watching the trees rush past. She clutched a small black bag, holding a few worn clothes, everything she owned. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had just left behind a place that felt like hell. Cris sat beside her, mostly quiet. His face was calm, but he glanced at her now and then, his eyes carrying a silent promise of protection. They didn't speak, but inside Elsie her heart whispered over and over, "Please God, don't let him be like my father. I just want peace." The city burst into view with tall buildings, busy traffic, and flashing lights. For Elsie, it was a whole new world, one she had never imagined. Cris hailed a tricycle, and they rode through noisy streets, eventually turning into a quiet lane lined with blooming flowers. Finally, they stopped in front of a tall black gate. Cris knocked gently. Moments later, the gate opened. Elsie's jaw dropped. The compound inside was clean and peaceful. The main house was painted white, the walkway tiled, flowers neatly trimmed, and a small fountain trickled in the corner. But they didn't go into the main house. Cris led her past it to a modest building at the back, the staff quarters. Inside was a bedroom, a small sitting area, a kitchen, and a clean bathroom. "This is where I live," Cris said with a soft smile. "I just got a job as a security guard. The madam here is kind. She gave me this place for free." Elsie looked around. It wasn't big or fancy, but to her it felt like heaven. 2 days after arriving in the city, Elsie woke to the smell of something delicious from the small kitchen. The morning sun streamed softly through the window, bathing the simple room in light. She opened her eyes and felt something unfamiliar. Peace. No yelling, no fear, no hunger, just calm and warmth. She stepped into the kitchen and saw Cris with his back turned, stirring something in a pan. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned around and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Elsie. I made breakfast. Did you sleep well?" She nodded. "Like I haven't slept in years." They both laughed quietly. It was a simple moment, but to Elsie, it felt like magic. After breakfast, Cris looked at her. "Get dressed. I want you to meet someone." "Who?" she asked, a little nervous. "Just wear something simple and neat," he said. She went back inside and put on a soft dress Cris had bought for her. She brushed her hair and took a deep breath. They walked out of the staff quarters, following the paved path leading to the main house. When the tall black door opened, a graceful woman in her 50s stood there with kind eyes. Mrs. Bennet. The homeowner? "Good morning, Cris, and is this the beautiful young lady you told me about?" "Yes, ma'am. This is my wife, Elsie." Elsie froze. Her heart pounded. But Mrs. Bennet's gaze was gentle. "You're lovely, dear. Just call me Mrs. Bennet. This house is big enough for peace." That evening, after tidying the small kitchen and folding the bedding, Elsie sat on the edge of the bed, deep in thought. Cris was on the floor, fixing a loose handle on the wardrobe. "Cris," she called softly. He looked up, his voice warm. "Yes? You want to talk?" Elsie looked down, nervously playing with her fingers. "That day, when my father told me to follow you, I felt like I was being thrown away, like I didn't matter." Cris slowly stood, keeping his eyes on her. "I thought maybe you'd be worse than him, that once we got here, you'd start yelling, hitting, or turning me into a slave." Her voice trembled. "But you didn't. You cooked for me. You let me rest. You respected me." Cris walked over and sat beside her gently. "I would never hurt you, Elsie. That's not the man I want to be." He paused, then continued, honestly. "I liked you the first time I saw you on the farm. I wanted to speak to your father, but I was afraid he'd insult me or chase me away because I had nothing." Elsie looked at him, surprised. "And when he said you were my payment, I was shocked, but a part of me felt relieved, like fate had opened a door." Elsie stayed silent. Then she whispered, "I don't love you yet, but I like how you make me feel. Like I matter. Like I'm a queen." Cris smiled. "That's because you are. You're a queen, just hidden in the wrong palace." For the first time in her life, Elsie felt truly seen. Life slowly became easier for Elsie. Each day, she cooked in the small kitchen, experimenting with new recipes and jotting them down in a little notebook that Cris had bought her. Her confidence grew with each passing day. One sunny afternoon, while helping Mrs. Bennet carry groceries into the main house, the older woman smiled and said, "Elsie, come sit with me for a moment." Elsie wiped her hands and sat beside her shyly. "Cris told me you're a great cook, and I agree," she said gently. "My former chef moved overseas with her family, and I need someone new. I believe you're the right person." Elsie's eyes widened. "Oh, thank you so much. I'll do my very best." "I see how hardworking and humble you are. I admire that," Mrs. Bennet added. Touched, Elsie softly asked, "Ma'am?" "I've been wanting to go back to school. I had to stop after secondary school due to family problems. But I love learning. My dream is to go to university." Mrs. Bennet's eyes lit up. "You love education? I admire girls with dreams. I'll help you." That evening, Elsie rushed back to the staff quarters and hugged Cris excitedly. "I'm going to be the main cook, and she said she'd help me go back to school." Cris held her tight, his eyes misty. "I'm so proud of you, my wife." But their joy was soon tested. A few days later, Julian, the man she believed was Mrs. Bennet's son, walked into the kitchen while she was cooking. He looked her up and down, smiling. "You're really beautiful. My mom was right about you. But honestly, you're even more amazing in person." His voice dropped, his eyes shifting. I want you to be my girl. I'll take care of everything, money, a new phone, clothes, even studying abroad. You'll never struggle again. Just say yes. Elsie froze. Her loyalty was now being tested. Elsie stood frozen in the kitchen, still holding the knife she had been using to chop vegetables. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Say something, Julian said, stepping closer. I mean it. I'm not playing around. She took a deep breath, steadying her voice. With all due respect, sir, I'm not interested in your offers. That was the first rejection. But Julian didn't stop. The next day, he came back with an expensive smartphone in hand. Just take it. A gift, he said, placing it on the counter. You don't have to say anything, just think about it. The second rejection. Elsie gently pushed the box back toward him, her eyes unwavering. The third time, he arrived with a reservation at a fancy restaurant, saying she deserved to be treated like a queen. Elsie smiled politely, then replied, I already have someone who treats me like a queen, and he cooks for me every morning with love. The fourth, Julian grew bolder. He grabbed her hand when no one was around. I could have Cris fired any day, he whispered. Just say yes, and he's gone. Elsie pulled her hand away, coldly replying, If that's how you think you can win me, then I know for sure I chose the right man. The fifth was the most threatening. Julian cornered her outside the main house, frustration in his eyes. You're wasting your youth on a broke security guard. I'm offering you everything and you still say no? Elsie held her head high. Yes, because I don't want a man who thinks love can be bought. That night, she returned to the quarters, tired but not regretful. She told Cris everything. Each visit, each offer, each rejection. Cris sat silently, his fists clenched. I can't let this go on. The next day, Elsie walked up to the main house and knocked gently. Mrs. Bennet opened the door, her face calm as always. Come in, my dear, she said kindly. Ma'am, I need to be honest with you, Elsie began, her voice trembling. It's about Julian. She told everything, every word, every attempt, every threat. She held nothing back. Mrs. Bennet sat in silence for a long moment. Then she said softly, You're a strong young woman, but I must confess something to you. She sighed deeply. Julian is not my son. Elsie was stunned. He was someone I asked to pretend, just to test your heart, but my real son is Cris. The room went still. Elsie's heart pounded. You passed every test. You didn't chase wealth. You chose love. And now you deserve to know the truth. At that moment, Cris entered, eyes filled with emotion. He took her hand. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I just needed to know if someone could love me for me, not for what I have. Elsie looked at him, eyes full of tears. You lied to me, but it was a lie born from hope. She smiled gently. I forgive you. And in that moment, all the truths that mattered were finally revealed. But what came after was not just truth. It was love, healing, and a new chapter waiting to be written. That night, after the truth was revealed, Mrs. Bennet invited Elsie and Cris to move into the main house. Their bedroom was ready, upstairs, warm, elegant, with white linens and soft golden lights. Elsie stood in the center of the room, in awe. She had never imagined living in a place like this. Cris came up beside her, gently resting his hand on her shoulder. You deserve all of this. They sat together at the edge of the bed, quiet for a while. Then Cris spoke softly. I wasn't looking for someone beautiful or talented. I was looking for a heart that could love truly. Someone who didn't care about my money, just about me. He looked into her eyes, and I found that in you. Elsie didn't say anything. She just nodded, her eyes glistening. That night, in the soft glow of candlelight, they whispered to each other about dreams, past wounds, and new hopes. For the first time, there was no fear, no distance. That night, they became one, not out of pressure, but from love, trust, and peace. After everything, Elsie had no more doubts. The love she had found was real, not because of wealth, not because of status, but because a man chose to love her when she had nothing at all. Time passed. Every day, Elsie continued to cook in their little kitchen, but her heart was full of hope. Her dream of going to school was no longer distant. With Cris and Mrs. Bennet's support, she was officially accepted into university. She studied day and night, juggling school with helping Cris run the small shop they opened with their savings. They did everything together, serving customers, bookkeeping, cooking meals. It wasn't a life of riches, but one filled with love, partnership, and gratitude. 5 years later, in a crisp white coat, Elsie walked across the graduation stage, tears streaming down her cheeks as she was announced as Dr. Elsie. In the audience, Cris shouted proudly, "That's my wife, my beautiful doctor." After the ceremony, he wrapped her in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she beamed. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." One peaceful afternoon, Cris took her on a quiet drive. They stopped in front of a stunning white mansion with golden gates. Elsie's eyes widened. "Why are we here?" she asked. Cris smiled and pulled out a set of keys. "This is your house. The promise I made. One house, one car, and one future." Elsie cried, hugging him tightly. "There's more," she whispered. "I have some good news." "What is it?" "I'm pregnant. 3 months." Cris froze, then burst into joyful laughter. He picked her up and spun her around. "My baby, Daddy loves you already." From rejection to royalty, Elsie had finally found herself. Not just happiness, but a life she truly deserved. 1 year after graduation, Elsie decided to return to Maple Hollow, the village where all her pain began. Not to show off, not for revenge, but to finally close the door on the past. She went with Cris and their newborn daughter, little Grace. As they stepped off the car, the villagers stared in awe. No one recognized the fragile girl from years ago, now transformed into a strong, confident woman. Her father, now an old, frail man, sat quietly on the porch. When he saw Elsie, he stood, tears already falling. "Daughter, I'm sorry I was so wrong." Elsie walked toward him and gently placed the child in his arms. "This is your granddaughter. Her name is Grace, because I've learned that forgiveness is grace." They embraced for a long time. No more anger, no more blame, only tears of release. Elsie had forgiven, not because the past had earned it, but because her heart was too full of love to carry hate any longer.